The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And Jesus told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on a path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. If you have ears, let's hear. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of that word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of this age and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I've always appreciated that parable. And I think it's a fairly popular one. I think a lot of people appreciate it because I hear lots of people talking about it often. Maybe some find it relatable. Maybe it feels easier to understand than other parables. Or maybe it's because it's one of the very few parables that Jesus actually explains after he tells it. But yet, on the other hand, this parable, part of it feels just unrealistic. I mean, this sower is just going to town, throwing these seeds left and right everywhere. In the spirit of a parable, I was trying to think about comparable examples for us of this kind of spreading today. And I was thinking, and things that came to my mind are like, the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, where, remember what they did in that fairy tale? As they traveled through the forest, they dropped breadcrumbs along the road. But there was a purpose to that, right? It was meant so that they could find their way back home. They were doing this intentionally and precisely for this particular purpose. So is that similar to what this sower was doing? Well, then the memory of my first car came to my mind. And I remembered how my first car seemed to drop oil everywhere it went. That wasn't intentional. It was more about the age of the car. Unless my parents had something to do with it, so they always could follow where I went. It was before all Life 360 and everything existed, so. But then I remembered back to this past Winterfest that we had here at church this past December. Do you remember that? We had that giant bonfire in the field back across the street. It was a cold evening. It was really windy this year. And so when the night was over, Jake and I, we were the last ones there. We decided we should probably try to extinguish the fire because of how windy it was. So we found 2 buckets because we had to get the water from here at the spigot all the way across the street to where the fire was. No big deal. That's what buckets are for. Except one of the buckets had a hole in it. It was a small hole, but you don't really need a big one to lose a lot of water. So after a bunch of times back and forth, we had this trail of water back and forth across the street. But that was because that's all we had to work with. But this sower from the parable, what was he doing? I don't think he was trying to mark a path so he didn't get lost. I don't think any reasonable sower would intentionally drop seeds on a path or in rocks or among thorns. Seeds aren't cheap. And Jesus doesn't seem to indicate that there's a hole in the seed bag. The sower must have just been feeling generous. Or maybe the sower was feeling so joyful, they were just tossing all these seeds about, allowing the wind to blow them wherever they might go, seeing where they might land and grow. But still, this was kind of unheard of, because this sower, the way he did it, he only had a 25% success rate with the seeds that were sown. 25%. That's even worse than the Royals are doing right now. So why was the sower even planting seeds in a place or in places that were so inhospitable to planting? Because maybe you're like me. When you hear this parable, you think about the places we plant seeds. And I look around here, we have these huge expanses of land, acres upon acres that have been tilled and sprayed and overseeded during the winter, and they've had as many obstacles removed over all the seasons that they've been used. Or even a small garden plot in our backyard. Those plots that we tend, they're usually tilled and weeded and most likely don't have a stone path right through the middle of it, taking up a huge chunk. So the way Jesus is describing this, is this an accurate vision of what their landscape looked like? Was the only good soil that was capable of growing plants in their day only found tucked between all the other obstacles? Between paths and rocks and thorns? Were there no wide open spaces where neat rows of seeds could be planted and cultivated? What was Jesus trying to have us envision? Or was this parable just truly that? A parable, an imaginary place, a metaphor about good things growing in and around all of the other hazards that are found in this world? I'm still not sure, even when he explains it. But it's gotten me thinking about how I like to see, or I want to see, or I hope to see things grow in this kingdom. Now think about it like this. Everyone has an opinion about something, right? Each one of us has thoughts about what is important and what's more important than other things. Even in the church, if you can believe this, most every person that is part of a church community has an opinion or thoughts about what they think is important in that church. Things that matter in and among the congregation. And not to say that other things aren't important or don't matter, but still, each of us can have strong feelings about something, right? So in seminary, and then after, and among many of my pastor colleagues, I've frequently heard this term. People say, it's a ditch to die in. There are some things that are so important, so fundamentally foundational, whether to myself or to someone else, that I or they are willing to fight tooth and nail for that thing. And so you might hear someone say something like that. I'm willing to fight for this. This right here, this topic, this opinion is a ditch that I will die in because it is so important to me. Where on the other hand, there are things that someone else might find extremely important that I don't. We all have these differing opinions. Maybe you've encountered something like this before. So just as an example, a hypothetical, if you will, let's say that there's a building renovation or addition being built at a church, and the time comes to choose the color of the carpet. Now, I'm not saying that would ever happen here, but some people might have a strong opinion about the color of the carpet. And I know pastors for whom this has happened. They've had groups of people arguing over the color of the carpet or arguing over some other opinion about something. And this group comes to the pastor who has to say, I don't care. This is not my ditch to die in. So have you heard that phrase before? Is this making sense? That phrase always sounds so negative, though. It means there's a fight to be had, a battle to be won. It means that what I believe is correct and yours is not. It's important, of course, but how do we get to what really matters? Now, I'm bringing all of this up because recently I heard another colleague say that I'm done choosing which ditch to die in. I don't want to have those battles. I don't want to talk in that way. I don't want to be that negative about the things that are important. Rather, I want to choose which seeds I want to nurture. I want to find the garden that needs tended. I loved that. I want to choose the seeds I want to nurture. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, that's kingdom talk right there. That's not fighting one another for an opinion. That's nurturing and growing what's important. That's providing good soil for the work that God is doing. Or how did Jesus explain it when he said the parable? He said that this is someone who hears the word and understands it. Someone who bears fruit and yields numerous times over. That phrase is where my mind went when I heard Jesus' parable of the sower this week. The sower was abundantly and joyfully scattering seed. There was no regard for cost. There was no regard for finding the very right landing spot. The sower wasn't just allowing the seed to fall over the place by accident. The sower was intentionally scattering it to any and every place imaginable. And then for us, instead of choosing the ditch that we would be willing to die in so that the seed that falls there might have a fighting chance to succeed, what if instead we prepared the soil where it could land and nurtured the seed as it sprouted and grew? Jesus said instead of a 25% success rate, it could bring forth a harvest of 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold growth. And this is what God was talking and telling the exiles from Israel through the prophet Isaiah as they were wandering. God said, just as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and don't return to heaven without having watered and nurtured the earth, so shall my word, God's word, will not return to God empty. The things that God say happen. Creation knows that, and creation rejoices. It says, the mountains shout for joy, the trees clap their hands. That was God's promise to the Israelites. And then this parable from Jesus is this reminder of all the things that God has overcome to do that, whether it be rocks or scorching sun or thorns. So much God has overcome to bring life to the world. God brings forth this life in places where people only see death. And Jesus is showing us that our job is to nurture these seeds. Our job is to receive those seeds and be good soil. Our job is to allow God's good news, God's love, to be planted and grow and flourish in and through us, for the sake of us, for the sake of one another, and for the sake of the world. Amen.